Hi everyone, it's Mary Strawn back with you today on the Kids Who Color Outside the Lines interview series. Today we're going to talk a little bit about friendship, and especially for kids who may struggle a little bit in this area. My guest works a lot with teens and adults with autism, and her name is Elizabeth Laugeson. I'm really happy to have her on because friendship is something that, when we don't have a challenge making friends, we can just take for granted all of the things that actually go into approaching someone, engaging in conversation with someone, and then, of course, keeping that friendship going once those steps are taken. So I really want to welcome Elizabeth today to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Mary. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a great conversation. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about what it is that you do and who you are?
Sure. Well, just by way of background, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm also an assistant clinical professor at UCLA, and my area is primarily in developing, testing, and also disseminating or sharing evidence-based treatments for people with autism. And my primary area of interest is in developing social skills interventions for people on the autism spectrum.
That sounds great. And you have a program. Why don't you tell people a little bit more about the PEERS program?
Sure. So PEERS is it's actually an acronym for the Program for the Education and Enrichment of Relational Skills. And PEERS was developed at UCLA probably about 12 years ago now. We initially developed the program for adolescents with autism, and these were higher functioning adolescents without intellectual disabilities, but who were really struggling socially. We since have actually expanded the program to also include other people with social challenges, not just people with autism, but people who are struggling to make and keep friends. We also now have a young adult program, primarily for people on the autism spectrum, and we've even expanded to a preschool program. These are all kind of areas that were kind of experiencing gaps in what was sort of evidence-based in treating social skills. And so the whole purpose of PEERS really is to help teens, adults, and also younger children learn how to make and keep friends, and also how to handle peer conflict and peer rejection. And what's different about PEERS from other social skills programs is that it's actually evidence-based, and that means that there's a lot of research to show the effectiveness of the program. There's many, many social skills programs out there, but sadly very few are actually evidence-based or even researched, and so that makes our program rather unique. Another aspect of our program that makes it unusual and sort of unique is that we include parents in the intervention. We actually have concurrent parent sessions that meet weekly when our teens or young adults are meeting and learning about making and keeping friends. We're including parents or perhaps other caregivers, maybe life coaches, job coaches, maybe even peer mentors. We're teaching them how to be good social coaches to the young people that we're working with. And the idea behind that is that this is a time-limited program. It's 16 weeks in length. It's not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but if we include parents and other caregivers in the intervention as social coaches, kind of teaching them to do the things that we would do as clinicians, then the program really never ends. And so we've actually studied our program years after people have gone through PEERS and have found this really beautiful, maintenance of the treatment gains over time. And I completely contribute that to parent involvement or caregiver involvement in treatment. So those are some aspects of the program that are rather unique. And then one other aspect that's kind of unusual, sadly, is that in PEERS we're teaching ecologically valid skills. And why I say that that's a sad fact to have to mention that is that unfortunately most social skills programs don't really teach ecologically valid skills, meaning not teaching what we think perhaps as adults kids should do in social situations, but teaching what actually works in reality. And so I'd be happy to give you examples as we continue to talk about how we teach social skills using these ecologically valid sort of methods.
Yes, I would love that because that's, what really intrigued me when we were first talking about doing this together. Just this idea of, we give, people, our kids or whatever, or, kids receive advice about how to make
Mhm.
friends, and it's not always the best advice.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's definitely true. We often ask the kids that we work with what they're told to do in social situations, and we have discovered over the years that they're not always given the best advice. And what's fascinating about that is just because you have good social skills doesn't mean that you know how to teach good social skills. I mean, we often
Right.
kind of take for granted the things that we do in social situations and maybe don't even think about exactly what we're doing. And so often the advice that people are given is actually incorrect. And so we have to correct that through peers.
Okay. So today we are going to talk about two things in particular. One is how to handle teasing, and the second one is how to handle joining a conversation.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yep.
So with regards to teasing, teasing is unfortunately very, very common, particularly for adolescents. The research actually suggests that kids with autism are 9 times more likely to be teased and bullied and even victimized by their peers than just typically developing kids. So I think most kids get teased, but in particular kids with autism seem to get teased and bullied even more significantly and severely. Unfortunately, the advice that kids often get, though, when it comes to handling teasing is often really bad advice. And it's not just here in the U.S. We do trainings all over the globe, and wherever I go, I always ask people, what are kids told to do in response to teasing? And I always get 3 very specific replies. And you want to take a guess, Mary, at what kids are told to do in response to teasing?
Yeah, like just walk away maybe?
Yeah, walk away is a very,
away.
very common bit of advice that they're given. They're also told to ignore the person, and then they're often told to go tell an adult. Those are the 3 common things that we hear, and this is across the globe. But interestingly, when you ask kids if those strategies work, do you want to guess what they say?
I'm going to guess no. They don't
Yeah,
work.
that's right. They say no.
It makes it worse,
Again,
probably.
yeah, exactly. And they're right. It doesn't really work. They're not ecologically valid social skills. It's not what socially successful kids are naturally doing. The reality is every kid gets teased. It doesn't matter how popular you are. Every kid gets teased. It's how you react to it that determines how significantly and severely you're teased. So just think about what those strategies would look like. Imagine, Mary, that you were teasing me. I know you'd never do that, but imagine that you were.
Yep.
And I just ignored you. What would you do?
I would amp it up a little bit.
You'd probably keep teasing me. Exactly.
Yeah.
And in that process, I would probably kind of look weak, like I wasn't really, defending myself. And do you think I'm more likely or less likely to get teased again by you?
I think you would be an easy mark for me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm an easy target because I wasn't really doing anything about it. Okay, so now imagine that you're teasing me and I walk away. What are you going to do?
I'm going to follow you and keep teasing you.
You're going to follow me and keep teasing me, exactly. And again, I sort of look weak in the process. I'm an easy mark, as you put it, and I'm probably more likely to get teased again. And then imagine if I told an adult that you were teasing me. Now what do you want to do?
As the person doing the teasing?
Yeah. Do you want to retaliate against me? Maybe
Yeah,
get back at me?
Yeah, I want to get back at you for sure.
Yeah, I tried to get you in trouble. Of course you're going to try to retaliate. And so, again, I'm more likely to get teased. So this is really, really bad advice, unfortunately. And, the thing is it's happening across the globe. Every kid is told to do these 3 different things, and they just don't really work that well. What we've discovered, though, through research is that kids who are really socially successful, they don't do those things. They don't ignore or walk away or tell an adult. Instead, what they do is they give a kind of a short comeback to the teasing, and it kind of gives the impression that what the person said didn't bother them. And also, maybe what they said, it was a little bit stupid. It was kind of lame. And so they'll say something like, whatever. or yeah, and your point is, or am I supposed to care? Is that supposed to be funny? What do you think they do with their eyes as they're saying these things?
Oh, maybe they roll them.
Yeah,
Or
they
they
roll their eyes. What do you think they do with their shoulders?
like shrug them.
Yeah, they shrug their
Just like,
shoulders, roll their eyes, and they give the impression that what the person said didn't bother them. It was kind of stupid what they said. And that makes the teasing not fun for the teaser. You don't want to make it fun. You don't want to reinforce it. Unfortunately, kids with autism, they often do exactly what the teaser wants. I mean, what do you think the teaser's trying to get you to do when they tease you?
react.
Yeah, they want you to react. They want you to get mad or angry or sad, maybe even tease back because it's fun for them. So if you do any of those things, you actually make it more likely that you're going to get teased again. However, if you give one of these short comebacks that shows that what they said didn't bother you, now all of a sudden you're not making it fun for them. In fact, you might even embarrass them a little bit in the process, and that's going to make it less likely that you get teased in the future.
Okay. Now, what if it does bother you? Like, you're able to, like, shrug it off in front of them, but what if it does bother you a little bit? Then what do you do?
Of course it's going to definitely bother you. It's always hurtful when people call you names or tease you. But what we found with the kids that we work with is that when we give them this very simple strategy to use these comebacks, we first begin by just practicing using the comeback so they get kind of comfortable with saying these things. And we use that with a very kind of a benign teasing remark. We don't want it to feel too emotionally charged because we don't want them to feel upset just as they're practicing. And so we'll tease them about their shoes or something that, maybe it wouldn't be so upsetting. And they get some practice at actually giving the comebacks. And what you find in those practice attempts is that there's a lot of laughter. It's not what you would expect, in a session on teasing. You think it would be very serious and very kind of emotional. And in fact, in all the sessions that we teach in peers, there's probably more laughter in the session on teasing than in any other session. And I think that's because, I think it's because it's very empowering for our kids to learn these strategies. They learn them very quickly, and they kind of feel like they're in control, and that's very empowering for them. So these strategies actually work quite quickly, and I think that, even though it can be very upsetting to be teased about different things, the fact that they now feel like they're in control in these situations and feel very empowered, I think that actually puts a very positive spin on the whole experience ultimately.
Okay. Now, Elizabeth, can I just ask you, I know we're talking about not primarily autism, but is this good across the board? Can anyone use these strategies?
Yeah, I mean, that's the really great thing about teaching ecologically valid social skills because we're teaching what kids who are socially successful naturally do. You don't have to have autism to benefit from these skills. And that's why we actually do use these skills in the peers curriculum with other populations. Kids with, for example, ADHD or depression, anxiety, kids without diagnoses that are just struggling socially can all benefit from these skills.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so shrugging the shoulders, kind of rolling the eyes, making a, so kind of comment will shut it down for the most part.
It usually shuts it down pretty quickly. However, I should explain a couple of other instances that could occur. When the teaser is they're kind of used to getting a certain reaction out of you. Let's say that you're used to getting a reaction from me where I get really upset or angry. I kind of put on a show, and it's really fun for you. Imagine that one day, all of a sudden, I say, whatever, or and in response to your teasing. In your mind, Mary, you're going to be thinking, this is not how this works. And you're probably going to try harder. And that's what's called an extinction burst. That's actually, it's a behavioral concept or behavioral principle that before a behavior is extinguished or eliminated, before it goes away, you might see a burst of it. That's an extinction burst. Now, we don't use that technical term with our kids. Instead, we tell them that the teasing may get worse before it gets better.
Okay.
But in most cases, if you continue to use these responses, consistently, the extinction burst is usually pretty short. It doesn't. By the time that the kids come back to our program the very next week, usually that extinction burst has already gone away. The person's probably already given up and moved on. There's also, though, another concept that we have to explain to our kids when it comes to teasing, and that's related to something we call technically spontaneous recovery. What spontaneous recovery means is that the behavior may come back at another time. So, for example, let's say that you used to tease me. It was really fun for you, but then I started giving these comebacks, like that was showing it wasn't bothering me, and eventually you kind of gave up. But then let's say maybe a couple weeks or maybe even a couple months go by. Maybe you see me in the lunchroom at school and you think, I used to really enjoy teasing Liz. I think I'll try again. That's called spontaneous recovery. It means that the behavior may come back at a later time. If you just keep giving those comebacks, though, eventually that person will move on once again.
Okay. Good. Thanks for clearing that up.
Sure.
Because, I was wondering what would happen if they would try to just keep at you to to finally get a reaction from you. Yeah. So it is important to keep doing this technique, stay with it, even if it gets worse.
Even if it gets worse at first. The other thing, too, is, after you've given a couple or a few comebacks, you don't have to stick around and take it. I mean, you can eventually walk away. Or if you can't walk away, you can try to disengage by maybe turning away. But you don't have to stand there and keep staring at the person and waiting for more. But you never want to walk away until you've given some kind of a comeback that shows that what the person said didn't bother you.
Okay. All right. Let's talk now about more on the making friends side of things and how to join a conversation.
Sure. This is another example of how, sadly, a lot of times kids are given bad advice when it comes to meeting new people. So one of the things that we research in our program is something we call peer entry. That's just kind of entering conversations or starting conversations with people. And we'll often ask kids what they're told to do in those situations. So imagine that you have a teen who's at, some kind of a social gathering, maybe a school event or a dance or something like that. They don't really know anyone, and imagine the kind of advice that they're given from adults. What do you think they might be told to do to meet new people?
Maybe just go ahead. Well, no, I was going to say, just go up and start talking.
Yeah, they'll go up and
have a topic and go up and start talking about something.
Yeah, so that's very right. That's true. They're often told to go up and just talk to people. And even more often they're told to just go up and say hi or go up and introduce themselves. Okay. Well, that's not really what people do in reality. I mean, could you imagine if you're standing with a group of people talking and I walk up to your group of people and interrupt by saying, "Hi, I'm Liz." What would you think of me?
Yes, I would think something, is off a little bit.
Yeah, you'd probably think I was kind of strange and maybe a little bit awkward, and you probably wouldn't be that interested in talking to me. So that's not really what socially successful people do. And when it comes to kids with autism, in terms of the mistakes that they often make, there's basically two kinds of categories of kids who sort of struggle socially. Then we've discovered this again through our research, that there's kids who are what we call peer rejected, and then those are the kids that are kind of teased and bullied, and they often have bad reputations. They're often kind of intrusive in conversations, and so these are the kids that might come up to the conversation and sort of barge in and talk about whatever they want to talk about, regardless of whether or not the group is interested. And then you have another group of kids, and we refer to them as the socially neglected kids. And those are the kids who don't even try to engage other people. They're often seen as shy or withdrawn. They're very isolated. And that would be the kid at the party that's just kind of standing along the wall, not really looking at anybody, not really even trying to engage others. But in both cases, it's difficult to meet people if you're not engaging them or if you're engaging them in inappropriate ways. And so what we need to do is teach kids who are kind of struggling socially what socially successful kids do in those situations. And so we've broken this down into very concrete steps. One of the things we've discovered in our work is that kids with autism and really any kids who are kind of struggling socially really benefit from us breaking down these social behaviors into their concrete parts. It's a lot easier to understand them if they're not really abstract, if they can be concrete rules and steps. So the steps that people naturally follow are you first kind of watch and you listen to the conversation. And you're sort of, what do you think you're listening for?
I think you're listening for what they're talking about and maybe thinking how you can contribute.
Exactly. So you're listening for the topic, and you're right, you're also making sure that you know something about the topic, like you could contribute to it. If they're talking about something you don't know anything about, then that's probably not the right conversation to join. Now, when you're watching and you're listening, do you think that you should be staring at them the whole time?
No.
No, that would not be good. That would be kind of creepy to the group. They'd notice that. They probably wouldn't want to talk to you. So instead what people do is they're usually using some kind of a prop, like maybe they're looking at their phone, maybe it's reading material, some kind of a prop to kind of look distracted by. Because what the reality is that you are eavesdropping on this conversation, but you don't want to look like you're eavesdropping. So you use a prop to kind of seem distracted. So as you're kind of listening to the topic, you're figuring out if you know anything about it. And then if you do know something about it, you share some kind of a common interest. The next step is that you move a little bit closer, no closer than an arm's length away. You wait for a little pause in the conversation so you're not interrupting. And then you mention the topic. And you can do that by either making a comment, asking a question, or maybe giving a compliment about that topic. And those are essentially the steps that socially successful people are naturally doing all of the time. They're not going up and saying hi and introducing themselves and interrupting people. And the great news about teaching these steps is that kids with autism and other kids who struggle socially can absolutely learn how to follow these steps. They just need to be told what the steps are.
Okay. I'm thinking about, sometimes I blurt out, and I'm talking about with my family, they'll be talking about a movie or something, and it will just trigger me to think about, another movie or something else that I've seen. And so then I did this at Easter. I blurted out, about a different movie. But then I could tell that it was not the right time to do that. I caught that cue a little late, obviously. But are the social cues important?
The social cues are very important. So what you kind of picked up on naturally, the fact that maybe that wasn't appropriate, maybe it wasn't that well received, those types of social cues, those aren't always so readily apparent to kids with autism or other kids who struggle socially. So we have to break down those social cues into concrete behaviors that can be observable. And it's funny, if you were to ask, most people, how do you know if you're accepted into a conversation? Many people will say, well, it's just a feeling that you get. But in reality, while there are feelings associated with, there's actually concrete behaviors that you're picking up on. You're just not really aware of it. It's so automatic. So think about that. Imagine that you try to join a conversation with some people that you either don't know or you just kind of know so-so. If they're interested in talking to you, what are they doing with their eyes?
Oh, well, they're probably looking making eye contact with me.
Yeah, exactly. So if they're interested in talking to you, they're probably looking at you and, not rolling their eyes or making a face. What are they doing with their body? Where would they be facing if they wanted to talk to you?
Probably me.
Yeah, they'd be facing you, exactly. Instead of turning away from you and giving you what we call the cold shoulder, they'd be facing you if they were interested. One of the things we've noticed, too, about groups of people when they're talking, they kind of talk in a circle. What do you think they do with the circle when they want to talk to you?
Oh, they open the circle up.
They open the circle, exactly. And when they don't want to talk to you, what do they do with the circle? They kind of
Maybe
close
they make it close it, yeah.
Yeah,
Tighter.
so those are terms that we use. Do they open the circle? Do they close the circle? Or are they facing you? Are they looking at you? And then the third behavior that you're picking up on is, are they just simply talking to you and not giving really short replies or making rude comments? And so those are three concrete behaviors that we can teach kids who are kind of struggling socially to look for to assess whether or not they're accepted or not accepted in conversations.
That's amazing. You've made me think about, just even anyone, how to approach, if you're at a party and you don't know a lot of people, how you can use those steps just to integrate into that situation.
It's funny, a lot of the parents that we work with who really act as social coaches to their kids, especially when we get to that lesson on entering conversations, they'll often say, I could use this skill. Or
I know, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, or they wish that they had had that skill when they were younger. They could have used the skills. I think anybody can really benefit from learning more about these social skills that we're all really required to know, but doesn't always come intuitively to everybody. Right.
Now, I know you said you have a preschool program too. Do you take the same principles and we just adjust the language and maybe the activities a little bit to the age of the children that you're working with?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that's sort of a theme amongst all of our programs is the idea of having these social coaches outside of the treatment setting, and it's most often parents. For adults, it's not always parents, but in our preschool program, the Peers for Preschool program definitely is parent-assisted, and so while the kids are learning about making and keeping friends, the parents are also learning about how to be social coaches. Of course, the skills are different for preschoolers, so in that case, with using the example of peer entry, that's going up to kids that you don't know and joining them. For younger kids, it wouldn't be joining conversations, it would be joining play. And play skills are very important when you're a child because that's how children interact with each other, is through play. So we teach them to be good sports, and we also teach them to enter play. So instead of entering a conversation, the steps look sort of similar, but they're slightly different. If you're trying to join a group of kids at play on a playground, you're going to first sort of watch the game, and you're probably going to need to figure out the rules. Make sure that you actually know. If they're playing tag, you need to know how to play that. If they're playing hide and seek, you need to know how to do that. So you kind of watch and you figure out the rules. If you know the rules, then you generally kind of move closer to someone who's playing the game. You maybe wait for a little pause in the game. So maybe if they're playing a game with a ball, maybe the ball goes out of bounds, or maybe someone's holding the ball. But you wait for a little pause in the game, not to interrupt too much, and then you ask to play. And so it's very similar in terms of how we structure the program with these concrete rules and steps. Of course, we need that additional parent assistance to provide social coaching outside of the group. But another aspect of teaching these skills that I haven't mentioned relates to what we call role play demonstrations and also behavioral rehearsal activities. And what that means is it's not just enough to go over rules and steps of social behavior. You have to show what they look like too, and also in some cases what they don't like. So using the example of joining other children at play, you might start with the bad role play of showing kids barging into a game and wanting to play something else and being rejected, and kind of talking about why that's not such a good idea to do that. From there, you get into the concrete steps that you're supposed to follow, and then you want to demonstrate what that looks like, watching the game, figuring out the rules, moving closer, waiting for a pause, and then joining the game by asking to play, demonstrating what that looks like. And then the behavioral rehearsals where you have the kids practice doing that very behavior, where you're there providing some coaching in the moment. So you can't really emphasize enough the importance of these role play demonstrations to sort of show what the skills are supposed to look like, or in some cases not look like, but also giving practice opportunities for kids to rehearse these skills. And that shouldn't just happen in the treatment setting, that should also happen in the real world. So homework assignments are really also quite critical to success in any social skills program, really. We have to give them assignments to practice the skills in the real world, hopefully with a little bit of parent assistance.
Excellent. I'm imagining that there may be some listeners who are interested in following up on this, because even I am so excited by it, because it just seems like such a an important and almost, foundational piece of interacting with people and being with people in the world. So let's first of all share your website.
Sure. The website is www.semel, that's semel.ucla.edu/peers. And on our website, we have information about our program. This is actually, it's an international program, so we've certified providers all over the globe. And if you go to that website, you can actually find a list of peer-certified providers in various communities. And then additionally, on that website, we have information about some of the books that we've published on our curriculum. So we have 2 published manuals, both for mental health professionals as well as educators. But probably for your listeners, I'm guessing they might be more interested in our parent book, which is called The Science of Making Friends. And in that book, we actually teach all of the skills that we teach in peers, but it's meant for parents, teens, and even young adults to read, maybe individuals that can't access a peers program. And the nice thing about that book was it wasn't really just written for kids with autism. I mean, even though most of my research has focused on those with autism, as I mentioned, this program is used for kids who aren't on the spectrum as well. And so that's more of a general book for anyone who wants to know more about making and keeping friends and handling peer conflict and peer rejection. It also comes with a DVD in the back of the book. It's a companion, and it has several role-play video demonstrations of what these skills are supposed to look like and what they're not supposed to look like. So that might also be a good resource for your listeners.
That's brilliant to have the DVD to so we can watch it.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you also have an app?
We do. We have an app. It's called FriendMaker, and this app actually was tested in our lab as a virtual coach. We really believe in social coaching, and that usually comes in the form of parents or maybe teachers or other caregivers. But we know that it's not always possible for a parent or a teacher to be there to provide that social coaching, and sometimes it's not even developmentally appropriate for them to be there. But most kids have a smartphone or an iPhone that can act as this virtual coach. And so what we've done is we've developed this app called FriendMaker, and it's available just in the App Store for anyone who wants to access it. And it has the entire peers curriculum broken down into all these concrete rules and steps. It's all bullet pointed throughout the app. And there's also 25 embedded role play videos of what the skills are supposed to look like or not look like. So to give you an example of how it might be used, we were talking about entering group conversations. Well,
Yes.
One of the things that you need to do when you're entering a group conversation is to first listen to the conversation, but use a prop so you look kind of distracted. So a lot of our kids actually use their FriendMaker app while they're kind of on their phone, kind of reviewing the steps they're supposed to be following before they actually enter that conversation. And that can be a really handy tool and act as a virtual coach in the real world.
Oh, that's great. That's very clever.
Thank you.
That's good. All right. Well, you have given us a lot to think about today, and I really appreciate that you actually took me through the steps and made me think about, what are we telling our kids, what advice are we giving, and then you kind of corrected us, through what through your research. So that was a great practice. Thank you very much for doing that and for joining us today. Yeah, no, it was wonderful to have you.
Well, thank you, Mary.
Just in the email that you received, the links are all there for the book and for the app, and also for the Peers program at UCLA. The website link is there too, so you don't have to look too far. You can always look it up yourself, but you can also click in the email the links there. And then coming up tomorrow, we have, I'm just looking to see who we have. Tomorrow is 2 guests, actually. And so you'll be getting the email telling you who those guests are in your inbox tomorrow. So be sure to check for that. Elizabeth, thank you again very much for joining us. Is there anything you'd like just to leave listeners with before we go?
Well, I would just like to thank you again for the kind invitation to speak on your program, and just thank you so much for all the important work that you're doing to help families of kids who color outside of the lines.
Oh, thank you. Well, friendship is a big topic, and it's something that's very important to have friends in our world. So this is a great contribution to the series. So thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you again for the invitation.
All right. Well, we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.